Bullies humiliate a black girl with a prosthetic leg until her father, a Navy SEAL, shows up. The cafeteria erupted in cruel laughter as 15-year-old Ava Stark's prosthetic leg clattered across the linoleum floor, spinning like a grotesque trophy for everyone to see. She lay sprawled on the ground, her lunch tray scattered around her, mashed potatoes smeared across her uniform, and the metallic gleam of her artificial limb catching the harsh fluorescent lights. "Look, the robot girl broke," sneered Tyler, the ringleader who had deliberately stuck his foot out as she passed. His friends howled with delight, phones already out, recording her humiliation for social media immortality. Ava's dark eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall, her hands trembling as she reached for her prosthetic. The whispers had followed her through the halls of Riverside High for months, but this was different. This was public execution disguised as teenage cruelty. Hello, beautiful souls watching from wherever you are in this world. I hope you're having a blessed day. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, because today's story will remind you that sometimes our greatest protectors come in forms we never expect. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I love connecting with you all. But right now, in this moment of devastating humiliation, Ava had no idea that 3,000 miles away, her father was stepping off a military transport plane, his Navy SEAL uniform still bearing the dust of a classified mission that had kept him away for 8 grueling months. Lieutenant Commander Ethan Wick didn't know that his little girl, his brave, brilliant daughter who had lost her leg in a car accident 2 years ago, was currently picking up the pieces of her dignity from a high school cafeteria floor. The other students formed a circle around her, some laughing, others filming, a few looking uncomfortable but too afraid to intervene. Ava's best friend Morgan tried to push through the crowd, but Tyler's crew blocked her path. "Come on, hop to it," Tyler taunted, making exaggerated hopping motions that sent his followers into fresh peals of laughter. "Or should we call maintenance to fix you?" Ava's breath came in short gasps as she finally managed to reattach her prosthetic, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely work the mechanism. The device that had taken her months to master, that represented her determination to live normally again, had become a weapon used against her. She stood slowly, her head held high despite the tears threatening to spill, and walked toward the exit with as much dignity as she could muster. But Tyler wasn't finished. "Hey, where are you going, peg leg? The show's not over." That's when something inside Ava finally cracked. She turned around, her voice barely a whisper, but somehow carrying across the suddenly quiet cafeteria. "Why do you hate me so much? What did I ever do to you?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment, Tyler's smirk faltered. But peer pressure and teenage cruelty won out. "Because freaks like you don't belong here," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is a school for normal people." The words hit Ava like physical blows, each syllable designed to cut deeper than the last. She felt something die inside her chest, not her spirit, but her faith that the world could be kind to someone like her. What none of them knew was that at that exact moment, Ethan Wick was pulling into their driveway, his heart racing with anticipation to surprise his daughter. He had no idea that the surprise would be his, and that the protective fury of a Navy SEAL was about to be unleashed on anyone who dared hurt his child. But first, Ava had to make it through the longest walk of her life, from the cafeteria to the school exit, past hundreds of staring eyes, carrying the weight of humiliation that no 15-year-old should ever have to bear. The question that would haunt everyone involved was simple. What happens when you push the daughter of a man trained to eliminate threats to everything he holds dear? Ava Stark had always been extraordinary, even before the accident that changed everything. At 15, she possessed a quiet intelligence that made teachers lean in when she spoke, and a determination that had carried her through 2 years of physical therapy, countless doctor appointments, and the soul-crushing process of learning to walk again. Her mother, Dr. Sarah Connor, often said that Ava got her steel spine from her father and her compassionate heart from her. Sarah worked as a pediatric surgeon at Children's Hospital, and she understood better than most what her daughter had endured. The late nights when Ava cried from phantom pain in a leg that no longer existed. The mornings when putting on the prosthetic felt like strapping on a reminder of everything she'd lost. The gradual, painful journey back to something that resembled normal. But Ava's deepest fear wasn't the physical challenges. It was the growing certainty that she would never be seen as whole again. That every relationship, every friendship, every potential romance would be filtered through the lens of pity or curiosity about her disability. She wanted desperately to be loved for who she was, not despite what had happened to her. Her best friend Morgan Freeman. Yes, she endured endless jokes about sharing a name with a famous actor, had been her anchor through it all. Morgan was the kind of friend who never treated Ava differently, who still expected her to keep up during their weekend hikes, who got genuinely angry when people stared. They'd been inseparable since middle school, bonded by their shared love of marine biology and their dreams of studying oceanography together. You know what your problem is? Morgan had said just last week as they sat by the harbor, watching boats drift in the evening light. You think that leg defines you, but I've watched you climb mountains, literally and figuratively. You're the strongest person I know. Ava had smiled then, but the doubt lingered. How could she be strong when cruel words from strangers could still reduce her to tears? How could she be whole when she felt like she was constantly performing normalcy for an audience that would never be satisfied? Her relationship with her father was complicated by distance and devotion in equal measure. Ethan Wick was a man who spoke in actions rather than words, who showed love through protection and sacrifice. His deployments meant months of silence broken only by brief, encrypted video calls where he looked exhausted but tried to smile for her benefit. Ava treasured those moments, but she also resented them. She needed her father, especially now, but his duty to the country seemed to always come first. What she didn't know was that Ethan carried a photograph of her in his tactical vest, right over his heart, that he'd requested early leave from his last 3 missions to be home for her physical therapy milestones, that he lay awake in foreign bunkers, tormented by the knowledge that he couldn't protect his daughter from the cruelest enemy of all, other people's ignorance and fear. The accident happened on a rainy Tuesday evening 2 years ago. Ava had been walking home from Morgan's house when a drunk driver ran a red light. The impact had been devastating. Her left leg crushed beyond repair, multiple surgeries, months of uncertainty about whether she'd ever walk again. But it was the psychological trauma that cut deepest. The moment she realized that her dreams of becoming a marine biologist, of diving in coral reefs and swimming with dolphins, might be forever out of reach. Her prosthetist, Dr. James Bond, another unfortunate name situation that he handled with good humor, had become like a second father to her. He was the one who'd fitted her first prosthetic, who'd patiently adjusted it through countless appointments, who'd celebrated with genuine joy when she took her first independent steps. He understood that the device wasn't just a medical necessity. It was a bridge between who she used to be and who she was becoming. Your leg doesn't make you disabled, he told her during one particularly difficult fitting session. It makes you differently abled. There's a difference, and the world needs to learn it. But the world, as represented by Tyler Morrison and his crew of followers, seemed determined to teach her the opposite lesson. Tyler was the kind of bully who had perfected the art of cruelty disguised as humor. He was popular enough to get away with his behavior, smart enough to avoid consequences, and cruel enough to target the most vulnerable students. He'd been making Ava's life miserable since she'd returned to school, but today had been different. Today there was a war. As Ava finally made it out of the cafeteria and into the empty hallway, she allowed herself a moment to break down. The tears came in silent waves, her shoulders shaking with the effort of keeping quiet. She couldn't let them see her cry. She couldn't give them that satisfaction. But Morgan found her anyway, as she always did. "Ava, honey, I'm so sorry," Morgan whispered, wrapping her arms around her best friend. "I tried to stop them, but there were too many people and it's not your fault." Ava managed through her tears. "It's mine. I should have seen it coming. I should have been more careful." "No," Morgan said fiercely. "Don't you dare blame yourself for their ignorance. Tyler Morrison is a coward who picks on people he thinks can't fight back. But he's wrong about you. You're a fighter, Ava. You always have been." Ava wanted to believe her, but the humiliation was too fresh, too raw. She felt exposed in a way that went beyond physical vulnerability. She felt like her deepest insecurities had been dragged into the light and mocked by an audience of her peers. What she needed was her father. What she needed was someone who could make her feel safe and protected and valued. What she needed was proof that she was worth defending. And unknown to her, that proof was currently driving through their neighborhood, his heart full of anticipation and his mind already planning the surprise reunion that would change everything. The question that hung in the air like a storm cloud was this: how do you rebuild someone's faith in humanity when humanity has just shown its ugliest face? And what happens when a man trained in the art of war discovers that his most important battle is about to begin at home? Ethan Wick's hands trembled as he turned the key in the front door, not from fear, but from 8 months of suppressed emotion finally bubbling to the surface. He'd survived firefights in 3 different countries, had his convoy hit by an IED in Syria, and had spent the last 72 hours awake during a hostage extraction that had gone sideways. But nothing compared to the anticipation of seeing his daughter again. The house felt different as he stepped inside, quieter. There was a heaviness in the air that his trained senses immediately picked up on, the same kind of atmospheric shift he'd learned to recognize before an ambush. Something was wrong. "Sarah? Ava?" he called out, setting down his duffel bag and scanning the living room with the automatic precision of a man who'd spent years clearing hostile buildings. "Ethan." Sarah's voice came from the kitchen, filled with surprise and something else. Relief, maybe, or desperation. "Oh my God, you're home early." She appeared in the doorway, still wearing her surgical scrubs, her face showing the exhaustion of a 12-hour shift. But when she saw him, her composure cracked completely. She ran into his arms, and he felt her body shake against his chest. Hey, he murmured, holding her tight. "What's wrong? Where's Ava?" Sarah pulled back, her eyes red-rimmed and worried. "She's upstairs. She came home from school about an hour ago and went straight to her room. She won't talk to me, won't come down for dinner. Something happened today, Ethan. Something bad." The protective instincts that had kept him alive in combat zones around the world suddenly focused with laser intensity on his home, his family, his daughter. "What kind of something?" "I don't know." She had food stains on her uniform. Her prosthetic was scuffed up, and she looked like she'd been crying. When I asked her about it, she just said she was fine and locked herself in her room. Ethan's jaw tightened. In his world, fine was military speak for everything is falling apart, but I'm too proud to admit it. He'd used the word himself countless times when calling home from war zones, trying to protect his family from the reality of what he was facing. "I'll talk to her," he said, but Sarah caught his arm. "Ethan, be gentle. She's been struggling since you left. The bullying at school has gotten worse, and she's been trying so hard to handle it on her own. She doesn't want to worry us." Bullying. The word hit him like a physical blow. His daughter, his brave, brilliant, beautiful daughter, was being targeted by cowards who saw her prosthetic as weakness instead of the symbol of strength it truly was. The rage that built in his chest was different from combat anger. This was primal, paternal, and absolutely lethal. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, his military boots silent on the carpet despite his urgency. Outside Ava's door, he paused and listened. He could hear muffled crying, the kind of heartbroken sobs that came from deep wounds to the soul. He knocked softly. "Ava, it's Dad. I'm home." The crying stopped immediately. "Dad." Her voice was small, disbelieving. "Yeah, sweetheart. Can I come in?" There was a long pause, then the sound of her unlocking the door. When it opened, Ethan's heart shattered. His daughter stood before him, still in her school uniform, her face puffy from crying, her usually perfect posture slumped with defeat. But it was her eyes that destroyed him. They held a brokenness he'd seen in the faces of soldiers who'd endured too much. "Daddy," she whispered, and collapsed into his arms. He held her as she cried, his own eyes burning with unshed tears. This was his little girl, the one who used to climb on his back and demand piggyback rides, who'd made him friendship bracelets before every deployment, who'd faced the loss of her leg with more courage than most adults could muster. And someone had broken her. "Tell me what happened," he said quietly when her sobs finally subsided. Ava pulled back, wiping her eyes. "It's nothing, Dad. Just stupid high school drama." "Ava." His voice carried the authority of command, but softened with love. "I've been in war zones where grown men try to convince me that getting shot was nothing. I know what real nothing looks like, and this isn't it. Talk to me." So she did. haltingly at first. Then in a rush of words and tears, she told him everything. About Tyler Morrison and his crew. About months of whispered comments and cruel jokes. About today's humiliation in the cafeteria. The phones recording her fall. The laughter that followed her down the hallway. With each detail, Ethan felt something cold and dangerous settle in his chest. He'd spent years learning to control his emotions in combat, to channel rage into precision and purpose. But this was different. This was his child. "They call me a freak, Dad," Ava whispered. "They said I don't belong with normal people." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. Ethan looked at his daughter, this incredible young woman who'd survived trauma that would have broken adults, who'd learned to walk again through sheer determination, who carried herself with grace despite the cruelty of others, and felt something shift inside him. "Ava," he said, his voice steady but his eyes blazing, "look at me." She met his gaze, and he saw himself reflected there. The same determination, the same refusal to surrender, the same core of steel that had carried him through the worst moments of his military career. "You are not a freak. You are not broken. You are not less than anyone else in that school. You are my daughter, and you are extraordinary. And anyone who can't see that is blind, stupid, or both." "But Dad, they're right. I'm different. I can't do everything other kids can do." "Different doesn't mean less," he said firmly. "It means you've faced challenges they can't even imagine and come out stronger. That prosthetic isn't a sign of weakness. It's a badge of honor. It means you're a survivor." Ava wanted to believe him, but the day's humiliation was too fresh. "It doesn't feel like honor when they're laughing at me." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his mind working through possibilities with the same tactical precision he used to plan missions. Then he made a decision that would change everything. "What's the name of the kid who did this to you?" "Dad, no. You can't." "Tyler what?" "Morrison." "But Dad, please don't make this worse. If you go to the school, if you cause a scene, it'll just make them target me more." Ethan smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile he wore when planning to eliminate a threat. "Sweetheart, I'm not going to make this worse. I'm going to make it better. Trust me." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to remind some people that actions have consequences. And I'm going to show you that you're worth fighting for." As he kissed her forehead and left her room, Ava felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Her father was home, and somehow, that changed everything. But what she didn't know was that Ethan Wick was already planning an operation that would teach Tyler Morrison and everyone else at Riverside High a lesson they'd never forget. The question wasn't whether he would act. It was how far he was willing to go to protect his daughter's dignity and restore her faith in herself. The war for Ava's soul was about to begin, and her father was bringing every weapon in his considerable arsenal to the fight. The next morning, Ethan sat his truck across the street from Riverside High, watching students stream through the front entrance like a predator studying prey. He'd been there since 6:30 a.m., dressed in civilian clothes, but carrying himself with the unmistakable bearing of a soldier. His trained eyes cataloged everything: security cameras, exit points, staff patterns, and most importantly, the social dynamics playing out on the front steps. He spotted Tyler Morrison immediately. The kid moved through the crowd like he owned the place, surrounded by a pack of followers who laughed too loudly at his jokes and scrambled to stay in his good graces. Ethan had seen the type before: bullies who thrived on power over those they perceived as weak. In his world, such people were dealt with swiftly and permanently. But this wasn't a war zone, and Tyler Morrison was just a 17-year-old kid who'd never learned that actions have consequences. Ethan's job wasn't to destroy him. It was to educate him. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Please don't do anything that will get you arrested. Ava needs her father, not a martyr." He smiled grimly and typed back, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." But the truth was more complicated. Ethan Wick was a man trained to solve problems with precision violence, and now he had to navigate the delicate social ecosystem of a high school without destroying his daughter's life in the process. It was perhaps the most challenging mission he'd ever undertaken. Inside the school, Ava was trying to make herself invisible. She'd chosen a seat in the back corner of her first period chemistry class, hoping to avoid the stares and whispered comments that had followed her since yesterday's incident. But invisibility was impossible when you were the girl who'd been humiliated in front of half the school. "Hey, robot girl," came a voice from behind her. Did your dad fix your broken parts last night? Ava's shoulders tensed, but she didn't turn around. She'd learned that engaging only made things worse. I heard she has to plug herself into charge overnight, another voice added, followed by snickers. Morgan, sitting beside her, turned around with fire in her eyes. Why don't you idiots find something better to do than pick on someone who's twice as brave as you'll ever be? Ooh, the robot's got a defender. Tyler's voice cut through the classroom as he walked in. How sweet. Two freaks protecting each other. The teacher, Mr. Anderson, looked up from his desk, but said nothing. Like most of the faculty, he'd learned to ignore the social dynamics that made some students' lives miserable. It was easier than confronting popular kids and their influential parents. Ava felt her chest tighten with familiar anxiety. This was her reality, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, trapped in a building with people who saw her as entertainment rather than a human being. She thought about her father's words from the night before, about being extraordinary and worth fighting for, but they felt like distant echoes in the face of immediate cruelty. Meanwhile, Ethan had moved to the school's administrative office, where he'd requested a meeting with Principal Williams. He sat in the waiting area, his presence commanding attention from every staff member who passed by. There was something about him, the way he held himself, the intensity in his eyes, the sense of barely contained power, that made people instinctively step carefully around him. Mr. Wick, Principal Williams emerged from her office, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and the harried look of someone fighting a losing battle against teenage chaos. I understand you wanted to discuss your daughter's situation. That's correct, Ethan said, standing with fluid grace. I think we need to have a very serious conversation about the culture of bullying in your school. They settled into her office, and Ethan noticed immediately how she positioned herself behind her desk like a barrier. Defensive posture. She knew there was a problem and was preparing to deflect responsibility. Mr. Wick, I want you to know that we take bullying very seriously here at Riverside High. We have a zero-tolerance policy. With respect, ma'am, Ethan interrupted, his voice calm, but carrying an edge that made her stop mid-sentence. Your zero-tolerance policy failed my daughter yesterday, when she was physically assaulted and humiliated in your cafeteria, while dozens of students recorded it for social media. Principal Williams shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't aware of any physical assault. If you'd like to file a formal complaint. I'm not here to file complaints, Ethan said. I'm here to understand why a student can deliberately trip a disabled student, causing her to fall and lose her prosthetic in front of an audience, and face no consequences. Mr. Wick, teenagers can be cruel, but boys will be boys, and sometimes these incidents are just. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ethan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes made Principal Williams stop talking immediately. Ma'am, he said quietly, I've spent the last 8 months in places where boys will be boys means someone ends up dead. I've seen what happens when good people do nothing while bullies run wild. And I'm here to tell you that my daughter's suffering ends now. Mr. Wick, I understand you're upset, but we can't just. Let me be very clear, Ethan continued, leaning forward slightly. My daughter is not a victim. She's a survivor. She's overcome more in her 15 years than most adults face in a lifetime. And if your school can't protect her dignity and safety, then I will. Are you threatening? I'm promising, he said. I'm promising that Tyler Morrison and every other student who thinks it's acceptable to torment my daughter will learn that their actions have consequences. I'm promising that this school will become a place where Ava feels safe and valued. And I'm promising that if the adults in charge won't step up, then I will. Principal Williams stared at him, recognizing something in his demeanor that told her this wasn't an empty threat from an angry parent. This was a man who'd made promises before and kept them, regardless of the cost. Back in the chemistry classroom, the harassment was escalating. Tyler had moved to sit directly behind Ava and was now making mechanical noises every time she moved. Beep, beep, robot malfunction, he whispered, loud enough for others to hear. Someone call tech support. Ava's hands were shaking as she tried to take notes, but the words blurred on the page. She felt trapped, suffocated by the attention and cruelty. This was supposed to be her safe space, school, learning, preparing for her future. Instead, it had become a daily gauntlet of humiliation. Morgan reached over and squeezed her hand. Just breathe, she whispered. Remember what you told me about the ocean? How are you going to study marine biology and swim with dolphins? Don't let these idiots take that away from you. But Ava was drowning in doubt. How could she pursue her dreams when she couldn't even survive high school? How could she believe in herself when everyone around her saw only her disability? What she didn't know was that her father was currently walking through the school hallways, having convinced Principal Williams to give him a tour of the facilities. He moved like a ghost, observing everything, cataloging the social dynamics, identifying the power structures that allowed bullying to flourish. He saw the way certain students commanded space while others shrank into corners. He noticed which teachers engaged with struggling students and which ones looked the other way. Most importantly, he was building a tactical understanding of the environment where his daughter spent most of her waking hours. When he passed the chemistry classroom, he paused outside the door and listened. Through the small window, he could see Ava hunched over her desk, her body language screaming distress. Behind her, a tall boy with perfectly styled hair was making exaggerated gestures that had other students snickering. Tyler Morrison. Target acquired. Ethan felt the familiar calm that came before action, the same focused clarity he'd experienced before every mission. But this operation required finesse, not force. He needed to dismantle Tyler's power structure without creating martyrs or making Ava's situation worse. As he continued down the hallway, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a video file. When he opened it, his blood turned to ice. It was footage from yesterday's cafeteria incident, filmed by one of Tyler's friends. He watched his daughter fall, watched her prosthetic skitter across the floor, watched her try to maintain her dignity while surrounded by laughing faces. But worst of all, he heard Tyler's voice clearly. Because freaks like you don't belong here. This is a school for normal people. The video had been posted to social media with the caption, "Robot girl malfunctions in cafeteria #cyborg down #peglegfail." It had over 300 likes and dozens of comments, each one more cruel than the last. Ethan closed his phone and stood perfectly still in the empty hallway, processing what he'd just seen. His daughter's humiliation had been turned into entertainment, shared with the world, made permanent in the digital realm where cruelty lived forever. The mission parameters had just changed. This wasn't just about stopping bullying. This was about restoring his daughter's honor and teaching an entire generation that some lines should never be crossed. The question was no longer whether he would act, but how far he was willing to go to protect the person he loved most in the world. And as Ethan Wick began to formulate his plan, one thing became crystal clear. Tyler Morrison and his followers were about to learn what happened when you targeted the daughter of a man who'd spent his life eliminating threats. The war for Ava's dignity was about to escalate, and her father was bringing every skill he'd learned in the world's most dangerous places to a high school in suburban America. That evening, Ethan sat in his home office surrounded by intelligence he'd gathered like a military operation. Printed screenshots of social media posts, a detailed map of the school layout, background information on Tyler Morrison's family, and most damning of all, a USB drive containing dozens of videos and photos documenting months of systematic harassment against his daughter. What he discovered made his blood run cold. This wasn't random teenage cruelty. This was an organized campaign of psychological warfare designed to break Ava's spirit completely. The evidence was overwhelming. Tyler had created a private group chat called Freak Watch with over 40 members, all dedicated to documenting and mocking students with disabilities. Ava was their primary target, but she wasn't their only victim. There were photos of a boy with autism being tricked into embarrassing situations, videos of a girl with cerebral palsy struggling with her locker while students laughed, and dozens of posts celebrating the humiliation of anyone deemed different. But the revelation that shattered Ethan's composure completely was a conversation thread he'd found buried in Tyler's social media history. It was from 6 months ago, right after Ava had returned to school following her latest prosthetic adjustment. "Tyler, the robot girl is back. Time to have some fun." Friend 1. "Dude, isn't her dad like the military or something?" Tyler. "So what? He's never here. Deployed somewhere playing soldier while his freak daughter ruins our school's reputation. She's fair game." Friend 2. "What if he finds out?" Tyler. "What's he gonna do? Cry about it. Military guys are all broken anyway. Probably why his kid is such a mess." The words hit Ethan like shrapnel. Not only had Tyler been systematically torturing his daughter, but he'd been doing it with the specific knowledge that her father was deployed and couldn't protect her. The cruelty was calculated, deliberate, and designed to exploit Ava's most vulnerable moments. Ethan's hands trembled as he read further. There were detailed plans for future pranks, including one scheduled for next week that involved tampering with Ava's locker, and another that would humiliate her during the upcoming school dance. Tyler had turned tormenting his daughter into a sport, complete with scoring systems and audience participation. But the final piece of evidence broke something fundamental inside Ethan's chest. It was a video Tyler had posted just hours after yesterday's cafeteria incident. In it, he was laughing with his friends, reenacting Ava's fall while making mechanical sound effects. "Did you see her face?" Tyler was saying to the camera. She actually thought people might help her. Like anyone cares about a broken robot. Her dad's probably ashamed of her anyway. I mean, who wants a defective kid? The video ended with Tyler making an exaggerated salute. "Thanks for your service, soldier boy. Too bad you couldn't protect your little freak from the real world." Ethan closed the laptop and sat in absolute silence for several minutes. In combat zones, he'd learned to compartmentalize emotion, to channel rage in a tactical precision. But this was different. This was personal in a way that bypassed every professional filter he developed. His daughter, his brave, brilliant, beautiful daughter, had been enduring months of systematic psychological torture while he was overseas. She'd been fighting a war on her own, without backup, without support, while he was playing soldier in foreign countries. The guilt was almost unbearable, but the rage was useful. A soft knock on his office door interrupted his planning. "Dad." Ava's voice was hesitant, uncertain. "Come in, sweetheart." She entered wearing her pajamas, her prosthetic already removed for the night. She moved with the careful balance she'd mastered, but Ethan could see the exhaustion in every line of her body. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I keep thinking about tomorrow, about facing them again. Dad, maybe I should transfer schools. Start over somewhere else." Ethan looked at his daughter, really looked at her. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the way she held herself like someone expecting attack, the defeated slump of her shoulders. This wasn't the confident girl he'd left 8 months ago. This was someone who'd been systematically broken down by sustained psychological assault. "Ava," he said gently, "come here." She settled into the chair across from his desk, and he noticed how she positioned herself defensively, arms crossed, ready to retreat at the first sign of disappointment or pity. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I need you to listen carefully." She nodded, her dark eyes wide and attentive. "What's happening to you at school isn't your fault. It's not because you're different or broken or any of the things they've told you. It's happening because Tyler Morrison is a predator who targets people he thinks can't fight back. And he's been doing it systematically, with planning and malice, for months." Ava's breath caught. "How do you?" "I've been investigating," Ethan said simply. "It's what I do. And what I've found is that you've been fighting a war, sweetheart. A real war, with real casualties, and you've been fighting alone." Tears began to well in her eyes. "Dad, I try to handle it myself. I didn't want to worry you while you were deployed. I thought if I just ignored them, they'd get bored and stop." "Oh, baby," Ethan said, his voice breaking slightly. "You should never have had to handle this alone. That's my job. Protecting you is my job, and I failed." "No, Dad, you didn't." "Yes, I did," he said firmly. "I chose my duty to the country over my duty to you, and that was wrong. But I'm here now, and I'm going to fix this." Ava wiped her eyes. "How?" "You can't fight high school kids, Dad. You can't just make them stop being cruel." Ethan smiled, and for the first time in days, it was genuine. "Sweetheart, I've spent my career dealing with bullies. They come in all shapes and sizes, terrorists, dictators, warlords. But they all have one thing in common. They only understand strength. And they only stop when someone stronger makes them stop. But what if you make it worse? What if they—" "Ava," Ethan interrupted gently, "do you trust me?" She looked at him for a long moment, seeing not just her father but the man who'd survived countless dangerous missions, who'd always come home to her, who'd never broken a promise in her entire life. "Yes," she whispered. "Then trust me now. Tomorrow, you're going to go to school with your head held high. You're going to walk those hallways like you own them. And you're going to remember that you are Ava Stark, daughter of Lieutenant Commander Ethan Wick, and you're not afraid of anyone. But Dad, what are you going to do? Ethan's expression shifted, becoming something harder, more dangerous. I'm going to remind some people that actions have consequences. And I'm going to show Tyler Morrison what happens when you target the family of a Navy SEAL. As Ava hugged him goodnight, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Her father was home, and somehow, that changed everything. But what she didn't know was that Ethan had already set his plan in motion. Phone calls had been made to old military contacts who now worked in cybersecurity. Favors had been called in from people who specialized in making problems disappear. And most importantly, a message had been sent to Tyler Morrison's father. A message that would arrive first thing in the morning and change the entire dynamic of the situation. The war for Ava's dignity was about to enter a new phase, and Ethan Wick was bringing every weapon in his considerable arsenal to bear on a 17-year-old bully who had no idea what kind of enemy he'd made. The question wasn't whether Tyler Morrison would learn his lesson. It was whether he'd survive the education intact. If you're enjoying this story of father's love and protection, drop a comment below and let me know what you think Ethan should do next. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us what real strength looks like. The next morning arrived like the calm before a hurricane. Ava woke to find her father already gone, a note on her nightstand that simply read, "Remember who you are. I love you, Dad." She dressed carefully, choosing her favorite jeans and the navy blue sweater that brought out her eyes. For the first time in months, she looked at herself in the mirror and tried to see what her father saw. Not a broken girl, but a survivor. Not a victim, but a warrior. But as she walked through the front doors of Riverside High, her newfound confidence began to crumble. The stares were more intense than usual, the whispers more pointed. Something had changed overnight, and she could feel it in the air like electricity before a storm. "Oh my God, did you see the video?" she heard someone say as she passed. "I can't believe it has 3,000 views now. Poor girl. I almost feel bad for her." Ava's stomach dropped. The video from the cafeteria had gone viral. Her humiliation was no longer confined to Riverside High. It was spreading across the internet like wildfire, her pain becoming entertainment for strangers around the world. She found Morgan at her locker, looking stricken. "Ava, I'm so sorry. I tried to report it, tried to get it taken down, but how bad is it?" Ava asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Morgan showed her the phone screen reluctantly. The video had been shared across multiple platforms, spawning dozens of reaction videos and memes. #RobotGirl was trending on social media, with thousands of comments ranging from cruel mockery to performative sympathy that somehow felt worse than outright cruelty. "I want to go home," Ava whispered, feeling the walls of the hallway closing around her. "No," Morgan said firmly. "You can't let them win. Your dad said to hold your head high, right? So let's do that." But as they walked toward the first period, it became clear that Tyler Morrison had escalated his campaign. Students were openly pointing and laughing, making mechanical noises as she passed, and someone had even printed out screenshots from the video and taped them to lockers throughout the school. The breaking point came during lunch. Ava had chosen a table in the corner, hoping to eat in peace, when Tyler and his entire crew surrounded her like a pack of wolves. Well, if it isn't our internet celebrity," Tyler said loudly, ensuring everyone in the cafeteria could hear. "How does it feel to be a famous robot girl?" "Leave me alone," Ava said quietly, but her voice shook with emotion. "Oh, but we're just getting started," Tyler continued. "See, I've been thinking, if you're going to be a freak, you might as well own it. So I made you something special." He pulled out a crude sign that read, "Broken Robot, Needs Repair," and tried to tape it to her back. When Ava stood up to get away, he grabbed her arm. "Where are you going? Don't you want to see your fan mail?" He pulled out his phone and began reading comments from the viral video. Each one was crueler than the last, and with every word, Ava felt herself shrinking smaller and smaller. "Here's a good one," Tyler said with mock enthusiasm. "Someone should put this defective robot out of its misery. And this one, why do they even let freaks like this in normal schools?" Ava's vision blurred with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of everyone." "Stop," she whispered. "What was that? I couldn't hear you over your mechanical parts malfunctioning." "I said stop," Ava shouted, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent cafeteria. Tyler smiled triumphantly. There it is. The robot finally shows some emotion. Too bad, it's just more broken programming. That's when Morgan stepped in, pushing Tyler away from her best friend. Back off, you psychopath. Oh look, the robot's got a defender again, Tyler sneered. What are you gonna do, call her daddy? Oh wait, he's probably too ashamed to. He never finished the sentence. The cafeteria doors burst open with such force that they slammed against the walls, and Lieutenant Commander Ethan Wick strode in like an avenging angel. He was dressed in his full Navy SEAL dress uniform, every medal and ribbon perfectly placed, his bearing radiating authority and barely contained violence. The entire cafeteria fell silent. Students who had been laughing moments before suddenly found their phones very interesting. Teachers who had been ignoring the situation suddenly appeared, drawn by the unmistakable presence of someone who commanded respect through sheer force of will. Ethan's eyes swept the room with tactical precision, cataloging every face, every position, every potential threat. When his gaze landed on Tyler Morrison, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Tyler Morrison, Ethan said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent space. I believe we need to have a conversation. Tyler, who had never faced a real consequence in his 17 years of life, tried to maintain his bravado. I don't know who you think you are, but you can't just... I'm Lieutenant Commander Ethan Wick, United States Navy SEALs. Ethan said, taking a step closer. I'm also Ava's father. And you, son, have made a very serious mistake. The crowd of students began to back away, sensing the danger in the air. This wasn't an angry parent having a meltdown. This was a predator who had identified his prey. I haven't done anything wrong, Tyler said, but his voice cracked slightly. Ethan smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression anyone in that cafeteria had ever seen. Really? Because I have video evidence of you systematically harassing my daughter for months. I have screenshots of your Freak Watch group chat. I have recordings of you planning future attacks on disabled students. And most importantly, I have a very detailed understanding of exactly what kind of person you are. Tyler's face went pale. You can't prove anything. Son, Ethan said quietly, I've spent my career hunting people who thought they were untouchable. Terrorists, war criminals, enemies of the state. And you know what they all had in common? They all underestimated what a father will do to protect his child. The silence in the cafeteria was deafening. Even the teachers seemed frozen, unsure how to handle a situation that had escalated far beyond normal school protocols. Now, Ethan continued, you have two choices. You can apologize to my daughter, remove every piece of content you've posted about her, and spend the rest of your high school career learning what it means to treat people with respect. Or, he let the word hang in the air like a threat. Or what? Tyler asked, trying to sound defiant, but failing miserably. Ethan leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. Or you'll discover that there are consequences in this world that go far beyond detention and parent-teacher conferences. You'll learn that when you target someone's family, you make enemies you can't imagine. And you'll find out exactly why people like me exist in this world. Tyler looked around desperately for support, but his friends had melted away, leaving him alone to face the full weight of a Navy SEAL's attention. But then Principal Williams burst into the cafeteria with 2 security guards, her face flushed with panic and authority. Mr. Wick, you need to leave immediately, she said. You're disrupting the educational environment and threatening a minor. Ethan turned to face her, and she took an involuntary step backward. Ma'am, I'm having a conversation with a young man who has been systematically torturing my daughter while your staff look the other way. That's not. We have procedures. You can't just. Your procedures failed, Ethan said simply. Your zero-tolerance policy is a joke. Your staff is either incompetent or complicit, and my daughter has been suffering because adults who should have protected her chose to protect their own convenience instead. Security, escort Mr. Wick from the premises, Principal Williams ordered. The 2 guards looked at each other uncertainly. They were middle-aged men who worked school security for the health insurance, not trained professionals who wanted to tangle with a Navy SEAL. Gentlemen, Ethan said calmly, I'm going to leave voluntarily. But understand this, my daughter's safety and dignity are non-negotiable. If this situation isn't resolved immediately and permanently, I will be back. And next time, I won't be asking for cooperation. As he turned to leave, He looked directly at Ava, who was standing frozen in shock and horror. This wasn't how she'd wanted it to happen. This wasn't the protection she'd dreamed of. This was a public spectacle that would make her life infinitely worse. "Dad, wait," she called out, but he was already walking away, leaving her standing in a cafeteria full of students who were now staring at her with a mixture of fear, pity, and fascination. Tyler, emboldened by Ethan's departure and the principal's support, couldn't resist one final shot. "Looks like Daddy's just another military psycho," he said loudly. "No wonder his kid is so messed up." The words hit Ava like physical blows. Her father, her hero, her protector, had just been humiliated and ejected from her school like a common troublemaker. And now Tyler was using even that against her. She ran from the cafeteria, tears streaming down her face, while behind her the whispers and laughter resumed with renewed intensity. Her father's intervention hadn't saved her. It had made everything infinitely worse. As she locked herself in a bathroom stall and sobbed, Ava felt more alone than she ever had in her life. Her father was gone, her dignity was in ruins, and tomorrow she would have to face a school full of students who now saw her as the girl whose crazy military dad had threatened a teenager. The war for her soul seemed lost before it had truly begun. But what Ava didn't know was that her father's public confrontation had been only the opening move in a much larger strategy. The real battle was just beginning, and Ethan Wick was far from finished with Tyler Morrison and everyone who had failed to protect his daughter. The question wasn't whether he would win, it was whether anything would be left standing when he was done. 3 hours after the cafeteria confrontation, Tyler Morrison sat in his BMW in the school parking lot, surrounded by his usual crew, but feeling anything but triumphant. The adrenaline from facing down Ava's psycho military dad had worn off, replaced by a gnawing unease he couldn't shake. "Dude, you totally own that guy," his friend Jake said, but even he sounded uncertain. "Did you see how fast he ran when security showed up?" Tyler nodded, but something felt wrong. In his experience, adults who made threats usually followed through with dramatic gestures and empty bluster. But Lieutenant Commander Ethan Wick hadn't seemed like a man making empty threats. He'd seemed like someone making promises. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your email." A friend. Tyler frowned and opened his email app. What he found there made his blood turn to ice. The message contained a detailed dossier on his entire family. His father's business dealings, including several questionable tax shelters and a pending SEC investigation. His mother's prescription drug addiction that she thought she'd hidden from everyone. His older brother's arrest record from college, carefully expunged but apparently not forgotten. Even his own juvenile record, supposedly sealed, was laid out in excruciating detail. But the final attachment was what made Tyler's hands shake. It was a video compilation of every cruel act he'd committed against Ava and other students, professionally edited and set to music. The footage was crystal clear, the audio perfect, and the editing made his cruelty look even more calculated and vicious than it had felt in the moment. The email's subject line read, "The real Tyler Morrison, coming soon to a social media platform near you." Tyler's phone rang immediately. The caller ID showed his father's office number. "Tyler, get home. Now." His father's voice was tight, with barely controlled panic. "We need to talk." 20 minutes later, Tyler sat in his father's home office, facing a man he'd never seen look truly afraid before. Richard Morrison was a successful corporate lawyer who'd built his career on intimidation and manipulation. But right now, he looked like someone who just realized he was outmatched. "Someone sent me a very interesting package today," Richard said, gesturing to a thick manila envelope on his desk. "It contains enough information to destroy our family, our business, and your future. Care to explain how we ended up in the crosshairs of someone with this level of access and capability?" Tyler's mouth went dry. "Dad, I don't know what." "Don't lie to me." Richard slammed his hand on the desk. "I know exactly what this is about. You've been tormenting that Navy SEAL's daughter, and now he's coming for us. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "He can't do anything to us," Tyler said weakly. "We have rights. There are laws." Richard laughed bitterly. "Son, the man who compiled this dossier operates in a world where laws are suggestions and rights are privileges that can be revoked. He's not going to sue us or file complaints. He's going to systematically dismantle everything we've built piece by piece, until we have nothing left. Tyler's phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Your father's right to be scared. But this is just the beginning. EW. Meanwhile, across town, Ava sat in her bedroom, staring at her laptop screen in disbelief. Her father had been busy during the 3 hours since his ejection from school, and the results were already visible. The viral video of her humiliation had been mysteriously removed from every platform where it had appeared. Not just taken down, completely scrubbed, as if it had never existed. The Freak Watch group chat had been exposed and reported to school authorities, with screenshots sent to the parents of every participant. And most shocking of all, a new video had appeared on social media, one that painted a very different picture of the situation at Riverside High. It was a professionally produced documentary-style piece titled, "The Real Bullying Crisis at Riverside High." It featured hidden camera footage of Tyler and his crew tormenting not just Ava, but dozens of other students. The editing was masterful, showing the systematic nature of the harassment, the complicity of staff members who looked the other way, and the devastating impact on the victims. But the most powerful moment came at the end, when the video showed Ava herself, not as a victim, but as a survivor. Footage of her physical therapy sessions, her determination to walk again, her academic achievements despite everything she'd endured. The narrator's voice, calm and authoritative, spoke over images of her prosthetic leg. This is not a story about disability. This is a story about courage. Ava Stark lost her leg in an accident, but she never lost her strength. She faces every day with grace and determination that most of us can't imagine. The real disability in this story belongs to those who mistake cruelty for strength and difference for weakness. The video had been posted simultaneously across multiple platforms and was already gaining traction. Comments were pouring in, not mocking Ava, but supporting her and condemning Tyler's behavior. Hashtag #StandWithAva was beginning to trend, replacing the cruel hashtags that had tormented her just hours before. Ava's phone rang. It was Morgan, her voice breathless with excitement. "Ava, are you seeing this?" Someone completely flipped the script. "Tyler Morrison is getting destroyed in the comments, and everyone's talking about how brave you are." "I don't understand," Ava said. "Who would do this? Who even has access to all that footage?" Her bedroom door opened, and her father appeared, still wearing his dress uniform, but looking more relaxed than he had in days. "That would be me," he said simply. Ava stared at him. "Dad, how did you?" "Sweetheart, I told you I was going to fix this. Did you think I meant by having a shouting match in your cafeteria?" Ethan sat on her bed, his expression gentle, but his eyes still carrying that dangerous edge she'd seen earlier. "The confrontation at school was theater," he explained. "I needed Tyler and his friends to think they'd won, to get overconfident and make mistakes. I needed the school administration to show their true colors. And I needed to gather intelligence on exactly how deep this problem goes. But Dad, everyone saw you get kicked out. They're saying exactly what I wanted them to say." Ethan interrupted. "That I'm an unstable military dad who lost his temper. It makes them underestimate what I'm really capable of." Ava looked at her laptop screen, where the documentary about her was still playing. "You made this." "I had help," Ethan admitted. "Turns out I know some very talented people who don't like bullies any more than I do. People with skills in cybersecurity, digital forensics, and media production. People who believe that sometimes the system needs a little adjustment." "Is this legal?" Ethan smiled. Everything in that video was recorded in public spaces or obtained through perfectly legal means. Tyler Morrison created all that evidence himself. I just compiled it and presented it in a way that shows the truth. Ava's phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Please forgive me. Tyler." Then another. "I've removed everything. It won't happen again." And another. "I'm transferring schools. You won't have to see me anymore." Ava looked at her father in amazement. "How did you?" "Tyler Morrison just learned that actions have consequences," Ethan said. "Real consequences. His father's business is under federal investigation. His college applications are being reviewed in light of new information about his character. His social media presence has been exposed for what it really is. And his family is discovering that when you make enemies of the wrong people, your comfortable little world can disappear very quickly." But what about school? What about Principal Williams and the teachers who ignored what was happening? Ethan's smile turned predatory. Oh, sweetheart, we're just getting started. By tomorrow morning, the school board will have received a very comprehensive report about the culture of bullying at Riverside High and the administrative failures that enabled it. Several teachers and administrators are going to find themselves facing some very uncomfortable questions about their professional conduct. Ava felt a surge of something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not just that the bullying would stop, but that justice was actually possible. That someone with power and skill had chosen to use those gifts to protect her. Dad, she said quietly, I'm sorry I doubted you. I thought you were just going to make everything worse. Ethan pulled her into a hug, and for the first time since he'd come home, she felt truly safe. Ava, I want you to understand something, he said. What happened today wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about showing you that you're worth fighting for, that your dignity matters, and that no one has the right to make you feel less than the extraordinary person you are. As they sat together watching the positive comments pour in on the video, Ava began to believe that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow would be different, that she could walk into school with her head held high, not because she was pretending to be strong, but because she truly was. The war for her soul wasn't over, but for the first time, she was winning. The next morning, Riverside High looked like a war zone in the aftermath of battle. News vans lined the street. Reporters interviewed students and parents, and the school board had called an emergency meeting that would determine the fate of several administrators. Ava stood at her bedroom window, watching the chaos unfold, and felt a strange sense of calm. For months, she dreaded going to school, had felt sick to her stomach every morning at the thought of facing another day of cruelty. But today was different. Today, she wasn't walking in enemy territory. She was walking into a place where the truth had finally been told. Are you ready for this? Ethan asked, appearing beside her in his civilian clothes. He'd taken leave from his duties to see this through to the end. I think so, Ava said, and was surprised to realize she meant it. Dad, what's going to happen, Tyler? Tyler Morrison is no longer your problem, Ethan said simply. His family withdrew him from school last night. They're moving to his grandmother's house in Oregon while his father deals with the federal investigation. Tyler will be starting over at a new school with a very different understanding of how the world works. Ava nodded, feeling a complex mix of relief and something that might have been pity. She didn't want Tyler to suffer the way she had, but she was grateful that his reign of terror was over. And the others? His friends. Most of them are facing suspension and mandatory counseling. Their parents received copies of everything their children participated in. Some families are horrified and are taking action. Others. Ethan shrugged. Well, you can't save everyone. But the culture that protected them is gone. They drove to school together, and Ava was amazed by what she saw. Students who had never spoken to her before waved and smiled. Teachers who had previously looked through her now made eye contact and nodded respectfully. The atmosphere had shifted completely. Morgan was waiting by Ava's locker, practically vibrating with excitement. Ava, did you see the news? Principal Williams resigned, and Mr. Anderson got fired for failing to report bullying incidents. What? Ava looked around in shock. The changes were even more dramatic than she'd expected. It gets better, Morgan continued. The school board appointed Mrs. Rodriguez as interim principal, and her first act was to implement a new anti-bullying program. Zero tolerance actually means zero tolerance now. As if summoned by her name, Mrs. Rodriguez appeared, a woman Ava recognized as the former vice principal who had always been kind to struggling students. Ava, Mrs. Rodriguez said warmly, I want to speak with you personally. I owe you an apology. We failed you, and that's unacceptable. I want you to know that things are going to be different now. Thank you, Ava said, still processing the magnitude of the changes. I also wanted to ask if you'd be interested in joining our new Student Advocacy Council. We're looking for students who understand what it means to overcome challenges, who can help us create a truly inclusive environment. Ava felt a flutter of excitement. Ah, yes, I like that. As Mrs. Rodriguez walked away, Morgan grabbed Ava's arm. Do you realize what just happened? You're not just surviving anymore. You're leading. You're going to help change this place for everyone. The morning passed in a blur of positive interactions. Students who had been bystanders to her torment now approached her with genuine apologies and offers of friendship. Teachers made special efforts to include her in discussions and acknowledge her contributions. The documentary about her had sparked conversations about disability, courage, and the real meaning of strength. But the most meaningful moment came during lunch. Ava was sitting with Morgan and several new friends when shy freshmen approached their table. The girl walked with crutches, and Ava could see the fear and uncertainty in her eyes that she recognized from her own experience. "Excuse me," the girl said quietly. "Are you Ava Stark?" "Yes," Ava said gently. "What's your name?" "I'm Emma. I saw the video about you and I wanted to say thank you. I have spina bifida, and I was so scared to start high school. But seeing how brave you are, how you didn't let them break you, it gives me hope." Ava felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears. "Emma, can I tell you something? Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going even when you are scared. And you're already braver than you know just by coming to talk to me. Would you maybe want to eat lunch together sometime?" "I'd love that," Ava said, and meant it completely. As Emma walked away with a smile on her face, Ava realized something profound had shifted inside her. She was no longer just surviving her circumstances. She was using them to help others. Her prosthetic leg, which had been a source of shame and vulnerability, was becoming a symbol of resilience and hope. The final confrontation came during the 7th period, when Ava was called to the main office. She found her father waiting there with Mrs. Rodriguez and a man she didn't recognize. "Ava," Mrs. Rodriguez said, "this is Dr. James Patterson from the State Department of Education. He's here because of the investigation into what happened at our school." Dr. Patterson stood and shook Ava's hand. "Miss Stark, I want you to know that your case has prompted a statewide review of anti-bullying policies. Your courage in speaking out, combined with the evidence your father provided, is going to help protect thousands of other students." "I don't understand," Ava said. "I didn't speak out. I tried to handle it quietly." "Sometimes," Ethan said, "speaking out means letting the truth be heard, even when you're not the one telling it. You survived, Ava. You endured months of systematic harassment and never lost your essential goodness. That's a form of speaking out." Dr. Patterson nodded. "We'd like to invite you to testify before the state legislature about your experiences. Your voice could help pass new legislation that would prevent other students from going through what you endured." Ava looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. "It's your choice, sweetheart, but I think you have something important to say." "I'll do it," Ava said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "If it can help other kids, I'll do it." As they left the office, Ava felt a sense of completion she hadn't expected. The girl who had been broken and humiliated in the cafeteria just days ago was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more confident, and more purposeful. "Dad," she said as they walked down the hallway, "I have a question." "Shoot." "When you were overseas, fighting in all those dangerous places, what kept you going? What made it worth it?" Ethan stopped walking and looked at his daughter, really looked at her. He saw the strength in her posture, the confidence in her eyes, the way she carried herself like someone who knew her own worth. "You," he said simply. "The knowledge that I was fighting to protect something precious, something worth any sacrifice." "I think I understand now," Ava said. "What I went through, what we both went through, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about becoming who we were meant to be." As they walked out of Riverside High together, Ava realized that her prosthetic leg no longer felt like a burden or a source of shame. It felt like what it had always been, a part of her story, a symbol of her strength, a reminder that she had faced the worst life could throw at her and emerged victorious. The war for her soul was over, and she had won. Not because her father had defeated her enemies, but because she had discovered that she was never as broken as they had tried to make her believe. She was Ava Stark, daughter of a Navy SEAL, survivor of tragedy, advocate for justice, and living proof that true strength comes not from what you haven't lost, but from how you choose to use what remains. And that was more than enough. 6 months later, Ava Stark stood at the podium in the state capitol building, looking out at a room filled with legislators, educators, and advocates. Her prosthetic leg was visible beneath her professional Navy dress, a deliberate choice that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Now, It was simply part of who she was, and she wore it with pride. "My name is Ava Stark," she began, her voice clear and confident, "and I'm here to tell you about the difference between surviving and thriving." In the gallery, Ethan watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and awe that threatened to overwhelm him. The scared, broken girl he'd found crying in her bedroom had transformed into a poised young woman who commanded attention and respect. She spoke about her experiences with bullying not as a victim seeking pity, but as a survivor offering wisdom. "The Americans with Disabilities Act protects us from discrimination in employment and public accommodations," Ava continued, "but it doesn't protect us from the cruelty of ignorance. That's why we need the Student Protection and Dignity Act, not just to punish bullies, but to educate communities about what real strength looks like." The legislation she was supporting had grown out of her case, but it had evolved into something much larger. It would require schools to implement comprehensive anti-bullying programs, mandate training for staff on disability awareness, and create support systems for students facing harassment. After her testimony, Ava was surrounded by reporters and advocates, but she handled the attention with grace. She'd learned to use her platform not for personal gain, but to amplify the voices of others who were still fighting their own battles. "Miss Stark," a reporter asked, "what would you say to other young people facing similar challenges?" Ava smiled, and it was genuine and radiant. "I'd tell them that their worth isn't determined by other people's ignorance, that being different isn't being less, and that sometimes the things that make us feel most vulnerable are actually our greatest sources of strength." Later that evening, the Stark family celebrated at their favorite restaurant. Sarah had taken the day off from the hospital to watch her daughter's testimony, and the pride in her eyes was unmistakable. "I still can't believe it's my little girl up there," Sarah said, showing them the video of Ava's speech that was already going viral. "But this time, for all the right reasons. She was always extraordinary," Ethan said. "She just needed to remember it." Ava laughed. "I had good teachers. Both of you showed me what it means to fight for what matters." The conversation was interrupted by Ava's phone buzzing with a text from Emma, the freshman she'd befriended months ago. The message included a photo of Emma at a school dance, surrounded by friends, her crutches decorated with ribbons that matched her dress. "Thank you for showing me that different is beautiful," the message read. "I'm not hiding anymore." Ava showed the photo to her parents, and they all smiled. This was the real victory, not the legislation or the media attention, but the ripple effect of courage, inspiring courage. "You know," Ava said thoughtfully, "I used to think that accident took something away from me. My leg, my confidence, my dreams of being normal. But I think it actually gave me something more valuable." "What's that?" Sarah asked. "Purpose. I know who I am now, and I know what I'm fighting for. I'm going to study marine biology like I always planned, but I'm also going to work on accessibility in marine research. I want to make sure that kids like me know they can swim with dolphins too, even if they have to do it differently." Ethan reached across the table and squeezed his daughter's hand. "I'm proud of you, Ava, not because of what you've accomplished, but because of who you've become. I learned from the best," she said. "You taught me that protecting people isn't just a job, it's a calling. I'm just doing it in my own way." As they drove home that night, Ava looked out at the city lights and reflected on how much had changed. Tyler Morrison was thriving at his new school in Oregon, where he'd become an advocate against bullying, his own experience with consequences having taught him empathy. Principal Williams had found work in educational consulting, helping other schools avoid the failures that had cost her career. And Riverside High had become a model for inclusive education, with Ava serving as the founding president of their Student Advocacy Council. But the most important change was in Ava herself. She no longer woke up dreading the day ahead. Instead, she woke up excited about the possibilities, about the people she might help, about the barriers she might break down. Her prosthetic leg had become something she was genuinely proud of, not despite its visibility, but because of what it represented. She'd had it custom painted with an ocean scene, complete with dolphins and coral reefs, a reminder of her dreams and her determination to achieve them. "Dad," she said as they pulled into their driveway, "can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you ever regret leaving the military? Giving up that life to be here for me?" Ethan turned off the engine and looked at his daughter, this remarkable young woman who had turned her greatest challenge into her greatest strength. "Ava," he said, "I spent years thinking my mission was to protect strangers in foreign countries. But my real mission was always here, with you and your mother. Everything I did overseas was just practice for the most important battle of my life, helping you remember who you are. And who am I? She asked, though she already knew the answer. You're Ava Stark, he said with a smile. You're brave, brilliant, and beautiful. You're a survivor who became a warrior, a victim who became a voice, a girl who lost her leg but never lost her way. You're my daughter, and you're going to change the world. As they walked into their house together, Ava felt the deep satisfaction of a battle won and a life reclaimed. She thought about all the students who would benefit from the legislation she'd helped pass, all the kids who would grow up in schools where difference was celebrated rather than mocked, all the young people who would see her story and realize that their own challenges could become their greatest strengths. The bullies had tried to break her, but instead they had forged her into something stronger than they could have imagined. Her father had taught her that true warriors don't fight to destroy their enemies. They fight to protect what they love. And Ava had learned to love herself, prosthetic leg and all, in a way that made her unbreakable. She was no longer the girl who had fallen in the cafeteria. She was the woman who had risen from that fall to lift others up. She was living proof that sometimes our greatest wounds become our greatest weapons, and our deepest pain becomes our most powerful purpose. And as she settled into bed that night, Ava Stark smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference, and new chances to show the world that strength comes in many forms, including the form of a 15-year-old girl with a prosthetic leg and an unbreakable spirit. The war for her soul was over, and love had won. Thank you for joining me on Ava's incredible journey of courage, resilience, and transformation. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to remember their own strength. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when you or someone you know turned their greatest challenge into their greatest triumph. Remember, we're all stronger than we know, and sometimes we just need someone to remind us who we really are. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit.